One's ready. One's ready. Go!
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. This next episode is with Charles Howell, and he's an EOD technician. He's been helping out recruiting for the 330th and just really overall an ambassador for the EOD career field. But before we hop into that one, please head over to onesready.com. Head over to the right-hand side where it says prep, hit the drop down that says partner discounts, scroll down to where you find Modern Athlete Strength Systems, and then you can click on any of those links or the pictures. They have the Warfighter program, the Warfighter Elite program, which just increases your volume and strength and that kind of stuff. And then they also have the 90-Day Unchained, which is a personalized one-on-one with dietitian, strength coach, a life coach, just to work you through everything. Now, that one in particular doesn't have a promo code to it, but if you do decide to sign up during the interview process, let them know that we sent you. And then when you click on those pictures or click on those links, you can still use a promo code to get yourself a discount on that. So do that. Make sure you're ready for any kind of pipeline. Make sure you're ready for the world, because you never know what's going to hit you, especially in some wild times like these. Enjoy the next episode with Charles Howell.
We'll just hop into the podcast here. Like right now, welcome back to the podcast, everybody. I stole the intro from Peaches this time. It's me, it's Peaches, and today, all things EOD, Charles Howell, the man, the myth, the legend in his own mind, some would say. I don't know that to be true. We just met each other.
Everybody's saying it.
Everybody's saying, I'm not saying it. Smart people are saying it. The smartest people getting a lot of calls. Sorry, a Trump impersonation right away. That'll make the people happy that don't have to listen to 5 minutes of ad reads, which is exactly what we're going to do in the pre-roll. Charles, introduce yourself. Let everybody know who you are, and then we'll get into all things EOD.
So I'm Charles Howell. I've been in the United States Air Force for the last 22 years, going on 23. Joined up right after 9/11, and I am currently the EOD accession manager, meaning that I control everything from basically the recruiting accession to the pipeline statistics to anything that we need to change to make sure that we're getting people into the pipeline, that we're getting people out of the pipeline to meet our CFM's actual goal.
Fantastic, man. That's a heck of an intro. Very concise there. What got you into the Air Force? Like, take us all the way back to a young Charles Howell. What made you want to serve?
So I was currently, at the time when I was after 18, I was going to Arizona State University, doing terribly. Basically had been there for over almost 2 years and had about probably 9 credits because I just, I wasn't feeling it. I didn't have any motivation to sit through class. I really wanted to be a federal agent. That was like my end state goal, was to be in the FBI or ATF. So I was doing criminal justice, not doing well, obviously, because Arizona State's a pretty big party school. But then 9/11 happened. Right when 9/11 happened, I was like, all right, that's, because I was in history class. So right when 9/11 happened, I literally went to an Air Force recruiter about a week later. They kind of were really busy because, it was going crazy. So they eventually were send us an email, give us all your information. And they were in one of those 4-branch recruiting office, where it's Marines, Army, and Navy. So a couple months went by, I wasn't hearing anything. So I kind of decided I was going to, maybe I'll try to be a cop, or I was just I was just all over the place. But I eventually had contacted the FBI, a recruiter, kind of like a guy that just gave me what I need to do to even get in. And he was like, you don't have a college degree, go to the military, go to the Army, go to the Rangers, go to basically be a Marine. And then he threw out EOD. And I was like, what's that? He's like, it's military bomb squad. And I was like, well, that sounds like Keanu Reeves and Speed. That's right up my alley. So I went back. I was like, I'm going to be a Marine, because the only military background that I have is my grandfather was a Marine Corps colonel for 34 years. So that's all I knew. And I had no idea that all 4 branches were different. Honestly, I thought all the BMCs were the same. Yeah.
It's like a little kid. Hey, are you an Army guy? No, I'm an Air Force guy. Yeah, so you're an Army guy.
So you're in the military. So I honestly had no idea. So I went to the recruiter's office. I went to the Marine Corps. I asked them. I was like, hey, I've been here before. I've sent emails to the Air Force. I want to do EOD. And he was like, hell yeah. The only difference is you have to be an E5 to go to EOD school in the Marine Corps. And I was like, what is that, like 6 months? Like, how long does that take? He was like, well, 4 to 6 years if you're selected. And I was like, well, what do I do for 4 to 6 years? Like infantry. And I was like, that's a terrible idea. Well, the Air Force recruiter was sitting next to him in like a tank top that just said USAF across, the shirt.
Hey, bro.
Yeah. And they were like, you can go right from basic training and right into EOD school if you go to the Air Force. And the Marine just looked at me in his dress blues and was like, that's what I would do. And so I was like, all right. So, they signed me up for MEPS. I did, I signed my contract, and it was either leave that following Thursday to go to basic or like 10 months later. And so I was like, I can't leave. I got an apartment. I got a job. Like, I can't leave on, next week, like this week. I'm going to have to, kind of wait till, October essentially. So I eventually was on like 10 months of delayed entry program. Like, and they were like, I'm working out. Like, I'm trying to, like, I'm thinking it's going to be like Full Metal Jacket, like base train's going to be crazy. Like, it's 2001, 2002. So there's no real videos on the internet about what I'm going to get myself into. Almost got a tattoo of an EOD crab like on my chest before I went to basic because I'm all tatted up. Because again, yeah, I wish I would have, because I would have gotten like annihilated. But
no, you wouldn't. Hey, hold on. Let me just correct some misinformation you just put out. First of all, to everybody listening out there, it's totally acceptable. If you want to get see this angel right here? If you guys want to go ahead and get the angel super big, like a super big chest piece, go ahead. No big, maybe just as long as you're within the tattoo regulations, I encourage every single person out there. If you want to get a huge flash, maybe a huge back piece, maybe something that says that others may live, like a huge belly piece. Remember Tupac's?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
If you just put that others may live there,
PJ Life across the
dude,
stomach.
Absolutely, just jaying it up. Yeah, I actually, you know what? Everybody go out there and do that. And if anybody wants to do it, if you're in the DEP program right now, I'll pay for your tattoo.
Yeah, it was for the money, because like one of the maps they gave me like a whole packet, and I was like, dude, that EOD crab looks awesome. It's like all 4 branches. I'm like, so cool. Well, when I got to basic, finally, after all my friends pretty much didn't believe I was going to the military after like 10 months, they're like, you're not going. Like, you keep saying that, but keep saying that. Well, when I got to basic, the first thing I realized was, one, it wasn't overly physically challenging. Like, I had spent the last 10 months, like, running like 2 hours a day and like hitting the gym. And I was, more or less surprised that it wasn't like, Full Metal Jacket. Like, I was expecting to get beat up a lot and like, just hazed every single minute of my life. Not what I expected. But the one thing I did find out while I was there was nobody had any idea what EOD was. Like, because every time, like when you're on a contract, we had, PJs, we had SEER guys, we had CCTIs come into basic and be like, hey, and they would tell us about their job and try to like convince us to come there. The SEER guy sold, like, I was almost trying to leave EOD because I was like, what he was saying makes his job sounds the coolest job in the world, like rock climbing and skydiving. I was like, dude, that's it. That's actually way more fun than blowing stuff up. Well, when I went and tried to ask him, I was like, can I switch? He was like, well, what's your contract? I was like, EOD. And he's like, no, you can't. And he just like pushed me aside. So all through basic, that's all we got. Like, everyone I was like, hey, where do I go when I graduate? Like, I'm, EOD. And they're like, I have no idea. Like, I don't know where that is. Like, maybe it's at like Chapman, Medina, Medina back then, but no idea. So finally, when I graduated, they just told me to go get this bus. They're like, it's probably at Medina Chapman. You have to go over there. Like, so just get on the bus and just go with the 342nd guys. And obviously, you guys know, like 342nd at the time was, all six jobs and some random like security forces, but they weren't anywhere near us. So when we got over there, I was, basically that's when I found out, like during like prelim, that they're like, only 40% of the people who start here are going to graduate. And that's like on a good, cycle. And prelim was basically just 7 straight days of like 12-hour like classes and like in a like basically a skiff. Didn't learn anything. It was so fast paced. Like, it was just crazy. But when we got to EOD school, that's when it really like, hit me like what it is that we're doing. Because we hadn't invaded, Iraq yet. It was still just, early, military, and, all the instructors are kind of strange, but because they all thought like the Air Force were like, everyone's making fun of the Air Force. There's the Army, the Marines, the Navy, and like everyone's just dogging on the Air Force. And it was like my first real like initiation into the fact that we are like the low man on the totem pole of like the pecking order of like who's awesome in the military. You know, the Air Force is like the little brother of everybody. So being with all four branches, like you just, you know, you're constantly trying to defend yourself and like be better at everything just because you're already the weakest when you showed up. But during EOD schools, when we invaded Iraq, and that was like, that changed everything for like the way the schoolhouse was being run. Like it was already kind of like wild that, you know, we're talking about like everything that was going on in Afghanistan. But it was at the time, you know, like you guys know, it was like just CCT and, you know, PJs and like special forces and like Ranger QRF. They weren't even doing much like, but that was like only people that were out there.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until that invasion in Iraq that like everything started like, you know, all of a sudden the school was like, they were drilling into you more often. Funny story about EOD school though, because I did get all the way through. Was not enrolled in training, you know, unlike some of my, you know, other friends that are out there. But when we started day one IEDs, we had this warrant officer was our OIC of IEDs, and he walks in, he goes, "All right, guys," he's like, "So this class is going to be really fun. It's going to be a really good time, but you are never going to disarm an IED. It is not a military objective. It is a civilian fight. It's the FBI's job. There's no combat IEDs. So like, you know, just enjoy the next 10 days of class and, you know, have fun. You know, you get to see the robot, get to put on the bomb suit. We didn't use it in class. We didn't drive the robot in class. And it was like, it was kind of just working your way through, like you just BS'd your way through the whole class. Like I remember I disarmed my IED and I couldn't find my initiator, which was the whole point of the, you know, the test. And it was like stuck in the door and I like ripped it out of the door. And he's like, "Why'd you do that?" I was like, "Because it seemed like a good idea." And he was like, "Hey, you got a 90." And I was like, that passes. And so, you know,
welcome to a houseborn IED. Well,
yeah,
you know, I'm sure your experience really supported that initial instructor's, you know, initial going in. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure you probably never had to do that in real life, right?
No, like, none of them had. Like, no Air
Right.
Force, Army, Marine, Navy instructor at that time when we were going through had any like IED combat experience. Like, this is 2002 and 2003, so like, it hadn't happened yet. Like, you know, there weren't any Vietnam vets in there, which was like the only other time that we truly had like, you know, a combat, you know, booby trap and stuff like that. So when I got to my unit and we ended up in Iraq, like, you know, almost like 6 to 8 months later, felt like we're disarming 9 IEDs a day, you know, on like a QRF basis. And I remember talking to one of the kids I was in class with, this kid, Matt Wilt, like he was in, you know, we were actually in EOD school together and ended up in Iraq together just from different units. I was like, do you remember, you know, Gunner telling us that like we're never going to disarm IEDs? Like, well, that was a lie, you know, like here we are.
You know, that was a Marine warrant, the Gunner.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, the only reason I recognize that term, just a funny EOD story. So those guys are very, very, very engaged in you calling them gunner. Like they have a specific term for these dudes, for these warrants specifically. I was leaving Djibouti. I was the load master for everything. Like I was the gear daddy. So he just happened to be operating some function. So I call up. I'm just jaying it up, super casual. I call him up and he rips off this really long like warrant officer name, and he's like, "Oh man, Chief Warrant Officer 4 Gunner, blah 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 blah." I have like 2 little brothers that are warrant officers. And that in the Army. So that was like the only real like warrant officers that I had really like known. So I was like, "Oh, what's up, Mr. Whoever, you know, Mr. Johnson?" And there was just silence on the other end of the phone. And then he goes, "This is Chief Warrant Officer 4 Gunner." And he repeats his name. He's like, "Who is this?" And I was like, "Oh, it's Aaron." And he's like, "Who the fuck are you with?" I was like, "I'm one of the Air Force PJs." He was like, "Makes sense. What do you want?" So cautionary tale. Those guys don't like to be called Mr.
Oh no, yeah. I mean, and I learned the hard way that Marines don't like to be called sergeant if they're an E7 or E6. Like,
No,
you know,
they do not.
No, you know, you got the Army who you can call anyone up to like an E9, basically sergeant. Like they're like, "Hey, Sarge." But the Marines, I called a gunny sergeant just because I was getting used to it, and he ruined my entire like afternoon. Like that was terrible.
My entire afternoon.
It was you know. That's why, like, so, like, as, like, you know, someone who nowadays, like, I talk to applicants all the time, basically, like, you know, 3 times a week. Every time they ask me, they're like, "So, you know, what should I expect, you know, combat wise, you know, when I leave here, like, what's going on?" I'm like, "Well, I know what's going on right now. But the minute you graduate EOD school, which is going to be 12 months from now, dude, I'm not going to answer that. Because like I said, like that story about that IED, OIC, he straight up, gave me what his feelings were and what to expect and what our combat's going to look like in the future. Nothing was that. Like that was completely the furthest thing from the truth. They could be disarming nukes for all I know, and I'm not going to try to tell them anything different. Just so what my experiences were, and that's kind of what it was.
It's crazy. Like when you said you had joined, they told you that, all right, you can shift now, in a month or 10 months. And I think that's a big change from where we're at now, because even if you wanted to, like, dude, I just got to get out of this situation I'm in. I need to go over there. It's still going to be like, all right, cool story, dude. You're going to need to wait 3 or 4 months for an admin job.
Yeah.
If you want to be a personnelist or a services or, anything like that, it's just because there's such a massive influx. And, Aaron and I are in Vegas, and Vegas is the #1 spot in the world for Air Force recruitment. Like there are more people in Vegas trying to join, which is pretty wild, because it's like, why Vegas? Nobody knows that there's a base here.
Half the people don't even, let alone 2 bases. People can't even tell you that Nellis exists, let alone Creech.
And so wild that you were able at that time, right after, soon after 9/11 kind of thing, is like, hop on in, like, let's go. You stop wasting time.
Yeah, and nowadays, like the kids we do get, they're like that did ship pretty quickly. A lot of them were either they try to go, SW, and they were, they didn't want to waste time with it, like because it took too long. So the recruiter's like, oh, just go to basic, and you'll pick your job when you get there. Which I do tell people, like, don't do that. If you want to pick a job, like pick a job. If you don't want to pick a job and you're just like up for, what we're gonna find for you, because that's what a lot of my unit does is when you come in open general, open mechanical, open electrical, we find you jobs, and it's not really up to you. It's what's available on the day you graduate basic training. There's a lot more that goes into like the whole scheduling portion of that.
Yeah. To anybody, and man, let's talk about the rash of shit I get from just anytime I talk to a recruiter because of things that I say. And I stand by the way. I'm not cowering to you commenters. You guys are a bunch of bitches. But
not every commenter. We love you.
I know. But the ones that are like the ones that are telling me that I didn't have involved parents, or that I won't do the same whenever like, hey, get stuffed. But
a lot of feelings behind those words. Are you okay?
A lot of angst, teenage angst. I've been listening.
Man, we went to brunch yesterday. I thought it was a pretty good weekend. Is everything okay at home? Are you all right, buddy?
I did see your guys' rant about parents going to recruiting. That's pretty funny.
Dude.
So my son did recently just join the Air Force, and he's going to be a load master. He was like on the fence with like, then these are the most random jobs. He was like, I'm thinking TAC P, and I was like, awesome. I was like, that sounds pretty. It's gonna be hard. It's gonna be. He's like, and EOD, and I'm like, well, that's way different. You just took a left, and he's like, and I'm thinking about being like a flight engineer. I'm like, well, now those are just 3 completely different worlds. Ended up being a flyer because he didn't want to be a nonner, as they call us nowadays.
I love that term. That's my favorite derogatory slur that we have in the Air Force.
I love it. I'm basically in the Army with an Air Force name tape, for the most part. But the you guys ran about some of the parents going with the kids. So when my son was going through the BMT, or I'm sorry, to the recruiting process, my wife used to work for that particular recruiting squadron as the director of operations. So when I was just around, I was like, I want to make sure that, one, I'm not in uniform if I ever go anywhere near the office while he's in there. So I don't want any of the staff or techs and recruiters to be like, oh no, like now we got to like be serious and like, and, got to click every button. And really, like, it was funny because when I first went there, I know how to get in some of their offices or whatever, because the 330th used to have a recruiter in that office that my son had gone to. And there were parents that were in there with their son, and they were sitting like at the desk asking all of the questions for their son. And I thought to myself, like, why my son was getting ready, and I'm like kind of just talking to some of the other recruiters, just messing around. I was like, that's kind of annoying. Like, that kid's going to be struggling. when he gets to like BMT and he doesn't have like an immediate access to ask those questions to his mom or dad, he's going to be struggling. And there's no outlet once you're there.
You're taking, it's a great, but essentially a benign opportunity, right? Yeah. Okay. Your initial visit or your initial 2 visits with a recruiter are not, you're not signing a life away. In fact, you could actually get out of the whole thing. Like if you're like, this is going fast or whatever, all the way up till basically shipping, you know? So, I mean, you can sign whatever documents you want but I still don't recommend just signing documents. But the fact that as a parent, you're going to take away your kid's opportunity to, all right, this is my first like step up into an adult role where I'm making a decision for myself, and Trent nailed it whenever we talked about it. He's like, are you going to go with them to interview with Deloitte, Google, Meta, like Starbucks? Are you going with them there? Well, it's a little different. I was like, it's not though.
No,
can you leave
exactly the same?
Can you leave a job with Deloitte or something like that? Probably. They do have contracts though. Like some of these companies do have contracts. That's all it is. It's if you look at it like that and you're like, man, I'm giving my kid the opportunity to step in. All right, I'm making a decision for myself. Like that was the whole point. But anyway, dude, we're totally detracting from.
Yeah.
Everybody, I want to just right now as we're taking a little break, as we're kind of like transitioning and stuff, I want you guys to shame Peaches for the fact that he's got sunlight that's shining on his face directly on his nose.
I'll fix that.
I even tried to text him to do it, but I thought public shaming would work best. So Charles, as you get through your career, how many deployments did you have? And what was your first deployment? Like, I know that you got maybe some bad intel on that first one and you had an aha moment where you were like, holy crap, this is a lot different. How did your feelings about EOD change over this deployment?
So like, honestly, like I was, when you graduate EOD school with like all 4 branches, in front of like the memorial wall at the time, like, I mean, it was already like a huge deal. We had horrible weather that day, so we had to end up doing our graduation inside, which is not as, significant because you're like in some conference room. And my first deployment to Iraq, like it changed my whole opinion on like how the Air Force functions. Our role in the United States Air Force, because again, as an EOD technician, like you spend the whole time like in all 4 branches during the schoolhouse. So if you don't know any better, if you're not like an NCL already or like cross training, like you don't have any experience about what you're going to like, go through, or what like, the Air Force is and how they treat us as EOD technicians. So my time in Iraq was my first experience in like, who we are compared to like civil engineering that we work with. For example, when we got off the C-130 in Iraq, they were trying to take our guns from us, like when we were coming off the plane, because at the time they would like put, finance and LRS and some of the other people, they would put their weapons like in an armory. Like you're not walking around with them in Kirkuk, like that was not a thing. They're like, oh yeah, so if you have weapons, like go to the army. And we're like looking at the EOD guys, we're like, what are we doing? Because there was a couple of Army EOD guys there with us too that were like transitioning out, and they're like, no, like obviously don't give them your guns. Like you're gonna need that outside. Like when we go to work, like you're gonna need that gun. I was like, all right, so that's good. And then like there was one moment where we were all went to FOBs, right? So there was Kirkuk was like where our command was, our captain, our senior, and like couple masters and like one team. All the air teams went to like different FOBs across that area of Iraq, and I was transiting to a different FOB because we had we were 6-month guys, and then there was also 4-month EOD deployments. So it was really confusing that who was leaving, who was not. So I was back at Kirkuk, and the CE commander and the first sergeant came into our office, just like kind of barged in, and they were like, "Hey, Captain Howell," or I'm not gonna say his name, but they're like, "Hey, we missed you at the award ceremony. We did it. We had like a whole like CE like function, at the Crab Cantina, and we didn't see any of your team." And he was like, "Well, we were busy. Like we weren't going. Like that's not a thing." And he was like, "Where's everybody? Like I thought you had 34 guys here." He's like, "Well, I have 6 here. My one team, my couple masters, my senior, and me. And then we have everyone else is at FOBs, McHenry, Bernstein, blah, blah, like Wilson. And they're like, oh, well, how come we didn't know that? And we're like, because we work for the 101st Airborne right now. Like, yeah, we are like under you because we deployed with the, whatever ECES, but we're 100% working for the 101st Airborne here in Kirkuk. And he was like, well, I mean, I'm gonna have to look into that. We're like, interesting.
Classic commander conversation.
Yeah.
He walks in, he has no idea where the forces he commands are, and then all of a sudden it's your problem.
Yep. And
like, hey man, I thought accountability was a big deal. Like you're telling me you don't know, sir, where your deployed forces are in a time of war in Iraq? Oh, okay, yeah, let me fix that for you. I can't believe how I failed you on this one.
And that was my introduction to like, our, association with some of the units that we work with in the Air Force, and who like we're under, is because during that time, like that was still new to like, CE, that was new to everybody. And like, what is Air Force EOD doing? The same thing Army and the Marines and Navy EOD are doing. Like nothing's different. Like, and yes, we respond to the fly line. That's why we have a team on the base. But other than that, like we are going outside the wire, disarming IEDs and responding QRF to, whatever other troops in contact. Well, the commander then asked our commander, who was like, well, I need to know every time your team leaves the base. He's like, I'm figuring out that you guys are going and, putting yourselves in like harm's way and blah, blah. So he's like, I need you to call me every time one of your teams leaves the base. So my captain was like, deal. So throughout an entire day, again, like my team alone was doing, 4 to 5 IEDs a day. So
40 times. You know what that's called?
Yeah.
It's called malicious compliance.
Yes, like, it lasted 24 hours.
Okay. You want me to call you every time? I'm going to blow your phone up 75 times every single day. And you ask for that. And then now call me crazy, but I'm going to go ahead and look into the future of this one. Did he tell you to eventually stop calling?
Oh, yeah. He was like, I'll take a weekly like sit rep. And Captain was like, sounds good. But, like coming back from that deployment, so we were only supposed to be there 180 days. It ended up being like 230 because there was no like figuring out, as being one of the first 6-month deployers in 04, 05, that how do we bring them home? Because we weren't planning that. Like there was no rotation. So like my next deployment was actually to Kuwait, which during the surge, we were supposed to be going to Kuwait, really not on purpose. We were supposed to be going to Baghdad. And when we got to Kuwait, all the EOD technicians in Kuwait had literally already gone forward and back into Baghdad. So they're like, hey, so since you're here, we're just going to need like 3 EOD technicians on this base for just, basic base support, UXO calls and whatever. And I was like, well, that's bad timing. So they're like, well, don't worry. Like you're going to end up in Baghdad in the next, however many weeks, months. Never happened. 6 months in Kuwait. Weirdest, like turned out to be one of the more just entertaining deployments. Got in the best shape of my life. Like did
Gym
a lot
tan
of
laundry, baby. That's all we're doing. Gym tan laundry.
Found the pool. Did dog and ponies seemed like every week. But when I got back from Kuwait after like my basic vacation of like 7 months that I thought I was getting the whole time, any day now, and go to Afghanistan, Iraq. I got back from Kuwait and already had a deployment orders to Afghanistan. So now we're going into like RC South. And at the time, it wasn't really that, I won't say busy for like our sake, but it wasn't like we were thinking Iraq. But Iraq and Afghanistan, regardless, were 180 degrees from each other. Because when we showed up to like training was different. Now we're doing like, instead of doing the QRF style stuff that we did in Iraq, where you're kind of like waiting around, waiting for troops to contact, you go out, waiting for like, ID call, you go out, post blast, you go out, but you're always kind of going to come back to the base. Afghanistan, as we started training for it, they're like, we're going to do flyaways where you're going to get dropped off somewhere and you're going to do whatever objective you're going to do. And then they're going to come pick you up and bring you back. And so that's how we kind of like trained for our, pre-deployment training. Well, while we were at training, one of my friends and one of my other team leaders, like best friend, Phil Myers, actually was killed in action in Afghanistan. Like while we were getting ready to, literally during pre-deployment training, go to Afghanistan in the same unit that we were going to take over for. So up to that point, Air Force EOD hadn't had any casualties in Afghanistan. So like Iraq was like our big, war at the time, where we had lost all of our, people in combat related injuries and whatnot. And so that we weren't expecting, honestly, like I wasn't, this is just coming from my opinion or my personal view. Afghanistan didn't seem that crazy before we got there in 2009. It was, again, like I said before, like it was kind of like a smaller unit war. Like, it was SF and SEALs and Delta and, special warfare is essentially not conventional forces, because at its core, EOD is, attached to going to be like, infantry units and like Ranger bats. And like, yes, we have units attached to like tier 1 assets. And we have units there with SF and all that, but it's not like the norm. It's like it does happen, but it's not the norm. But when we got to Afghanistan, like it was already like, a totally different combat situation than Iraq was. So again, PTSD from Iraq was totally different than PTSD I got from Afghanistan, because Iraq was like, you have to go home sometimes and like sleep. Afghanistan was like, hey, we're going to drop you off here and we'll pick you up probably in a week. So go to these 3 checkpoints and we'll come find you. And you're like, and that sometimes happened. But once I got back from Afghanistan, like I was, at this point, I'm a team leader. I've been in like 7 years. I've been on 4 deployments. So I'm like kind of getting, hey, like this is getting wild. Like I'm going to make tech sergeant really fast because I'm getting all these points with all these medals. Everything's crazy. And then when I got back from Afghanistan, I had orders to go to the schoolhouse. And I was so pissed off. Like I had never, like there were non-voling people to go be instructors. And I was irate. Like I have never, if the schoolhouse wasn't in Florida, I, would have absolutely lost my mind. But I was so pissed off because one of the guys I was in Afghanistan with, he was at Luke Air Force Base, and they took all the guys from the range bases. I was at Hill at the time. And basically what happened was like, we already heard they were getting non-volled. And I was like, dude, have fun with that. And, like, yeah, no. People who teach can't, like, good luck, bro.
Wow. Oh, and then your words are just echoing in your head as you show up on that first day.
Yep.
You need to like check your email because you got a rip.
Yeah. And what's funny is like you never check your email when you're deployed. You're just kind of like, whatever. Like I'll delete all that if I don't see my name in there, And then sure enough, I saw my name in the 2 block as I was doing like an all out, delete. And I opened it and it was like RIP. And I was like, oh no. And it was like 366 TRS. And I was like, dude, you are killing me. So I say this to every EOD student who graduated between the years of 11 and 14. We were pissed. Like every Air Force EOD instructor there, except for like maybe 2, were like non-volled. Every Army instructor, non-volled. The Navy and the Marines were the only ones that like raised their hand to go there. Navy they have to do a shore det. So no matter what they were doing, they kind of had to do that for 3 years. And plus they all worked in underwater, so they didn't care. The Marines, they took it as like a vacation. Like they're the more common sense, military asset that we have. They're like, I've been going to combat every like 6 to 8 months, like on a regular basis. I'm already divorced. I'm going to go to the schoolhouse and, take a break for like 4 years. But the Air Force and Army, we were pissed. And we took it out on every single student that we taught for 4 years.
Well, but, I had the same experience as you. When I showed up to the schoolhouse, I mean, this was like 2006, right? So I showed up to the schoolhouse, and the number of instructors that actually had combat experience, like there were a whole bunch of people that were just like, hey, hearing stories from friends, here's what you guys are going to get into, and here's what you need to be prepared for. But, there was this whole essentially like division between people that had seen actual combat that went in early in Iraq and then early in Afghanistan, and the instructors, because just the way the Air Force works, right? Like you get those orders for 4 years and they missed that big push in. So by the time that they were there, they were just bitter and upset.
Yeah.
I know that this was a bad thing for you to feel, but there had to be something in the back of your mind that, when you go back to that gunner, when you go back to like, hold on, I can pour this experience into the guys, because now you're the guy with 4 or 5 combat deployments at this point. You have you actually, turned off an IED and protected and saved people. That had to, at least sometime in your instructional career, that had to be a thought in your mind, right? Like at least now I can give these guys the real question or the real.
So after like once you get through a basic instructor course, which is, anytime you've done anything in our jobs, then you go to like another Air Force, like a specifically Air Force school, like basic instructor course. I immediately started taking that like into, this is going to be fun. Like I don't mind teaching. That's actually one of my favorite things to do is, teach, the younger or newer, population in anything. So I eventually became like a master instructor while I was there. The Navy has a master instructor program that, I went through, and the same with the Air Force has a master instructor program that you can like go to other classes and do all this instructional development and stuff like that, write curriculum and whatnot. But I loved being an instructor for those 4 years, because once you get used to the point that like, okay, you're not going to deploy. Like it was an undeployable unit. We had experience, so all of the instructors there were all combat vets. Because there was very few that were there when I got there that had missed any of the deployments prior to having to get, taken that job. But the one thing that I always wanted to make sure that I never did, and the reason why like I'm in the process of retirement, is when I first came in the military, everyone was convinced that we were going to go to war with like North Korea or Iraq or Iran, and it was only going to be chemical weapons. And that was going to be the only thing we saw. And so we spent every waking minute doing chemical weapon stuff. Like there was nothing right or left of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're disarming IEDs. And so when I was stationed in Aviano, I would see a lot of, of my generation basically only training kids on, IEDs. And it was IEDs and small unit tactics. And I'm like, well, both those wars are over now. Like it's 2017. Like there is very few people left in Afghanistan. We're closing it down. Like there's nobody in Iraq doing anything like that really, except for, again, like small amounts of like Army EOD techs and whatever. But like those are primarily over. Like none of these guys are going to be doing that. So it's not that, don't forget that it happened, but let's not be the guys that when we came in, we complained about. We complained about we're only doing one thing all the time. And now these guys are complaining about like, why do we never, do any of this other stuff? Like, why are we always isolating, something or, doing IED stuff? Like I thought we had 9 mission sets, like we're never doing anything else. And so as an instructor, I always wanted to like make sure that, so I didn't want to teach in IEDs. They gave me the option to teach advanced IEDs, and I wanted to go teach in Air Ordnance Division. And the reason was because I wanted to teach in a division that didn't have a lot of, it was more black and white. And in the ground and air divisions, when they fail a test, they fail and it's all publication based. Like you're like, hey, you didn't do step 4, dude, you failed. When they fail in IEDs, there's a real good possibility that I can be like, that's not what I would have done. So it's a little, it's a little bit more like there's a little bit more information that you can kind of like, move right or left than like what is just specifically the right way to do something. It's a lot different now because that was a new, like they expanded that division right before I got there. But
I get when you're talking about, there's black and white, then there's, hey, well, maybe I would have done it a little bit wrong. Or differently, it's subjective, right? And that's part of the things that with historically, whether it's IEDs, VBEDs, houseborne IEDs, and that kind of stuff. Plus, you start talking about, all the home stuff, right? Or not home stuff. What I'm missing the word right now. Anyway, all the stuff that you have at home and fertilizer and all that kind of stuff. Anyway,
home expo HME. Yeah.
There you go, HME. The differences in all the different trigger mechanisms and everything like that, you start talking about like, okay, different provinces within Afghanistan had different things that they did. Same with Afghanistan, and using something as simple as a reciprocating saw blades that
yeah.
it just that kind of things. And
dude, the most terrifying example of that, we were in Afghanistan in RC South, so we were in Helmand, and there was a TC. They brought us all in, and it was this big deal. They were like, "Hey, you guys need to all come in. This is a secret meeting. We're going to do all this other stuff." And they were like, "Hey, here's the issue. There was an aircraft called Aerosmith. So what these guys, their entire job was they'd fly around on helicopters, and they would directionally find these towers that they were using to communicate, and then they would go kill the tower so that the enemy couldn't communicate. Right? Basic tactics. Well, they were using." Xbox had the Kinetic at the time that was a motion sensor, and they put these around the tower so that when the helicopter came in, the motion sensor would clack off, and it was a directional IED, and it killed a helicopter. It killed like 6 dudes. That was terrifying. Like we
Yeah,
had EOD.
I actually did one of those missions in '09, taking one of those towers down.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, that was. I walked out of that meeting very few times in my professional career have I walked out of a meeting and been like honestly scared for my dudes and honestly scared for the teams that were going out. And it was when that TTP emerged that they were using motion sensors from off the shelf stuff that they could just buy. You can just buy an Xbox anywhere and you could buy that little kinetic motion sensor thing. And then they attached that to an IED and it literally killed people. It killed Americans. That was terrifying to me.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing with the ID division, especially when I got there in 10 through 14. Like I said, like when I went through IEDs, like it was only 10 like weekdays, so it wasn't that they didn't put a lot of like emphasis on it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you got through air, when I went through EOD school, like you graduated, you had IEDs and nukes next, like you were done. Like no one failed those two divisions. When I went back as an instructor, IEDs was like 30 days long now, and lots of people fail IEDs now because they do, the stateside versions and then like a combat version. And it's difficult now. So every time I hear kids talk about like, EOD school is so much easier than it was when I went through, I'm like, well, IEDs was way easier when I went through. And now it's like you guys said, like there's so much more like that we know about now that we're able to teach. And there's so much more that goes into it that, they had to add more training days to make it more and more difficult. And it 100% is way more challenging than it was when we went through. And the ordnance divisions, they no matter what they do to make them easier, they still have, the failure rate never moves. That's one thing about EOD school is the Navy is always trying to find ways to make things easier, and they don't want to make things too ambiguous, especially in IEDs. And that was like my big fear was teaching there was I didn't want to, my opinion be the reason why like I'm failing some kid. I wanted to be like, hey, see here on this page, like you didn't do this, so you failed. Like I don't need to argue with you about it. You just did it wrong. But yeah, like so and they're always trying to move divisions around. Like when I was there, they moved demo to the first division because Corey used to be the first division, and failure rate didn't change. Like 65%, like across the board. All our prelims are a little different, and that's why it's kind of weird, and AETC doesn't know how to navigate it because it's a Navy school, and they're always trying to tell us to like we got to change stuff to up the failure, like lower the failure rate. And I'm like, well, that's not our, it's net C, it's not an Air Force issue. I'd like to see you go try to tell like a Rear Admiral to change his EOD school. He'll freak. Not going to happen. But yeah, like so I loved my time in EOD school. It was actually turned out to be a really good time. I mean, I love Florida. I go here to the 850, but it's just like it was a great area and it was a great time. I learned a lot. I've angered a lot of kids. Apparently, every time I go back to the EOD Memorial, some random drunk kid would walk up to me at a bar and be like, "Do you remember me?" And I'm like, "No." He's like, "You failed me in like air and you screamed at me," and I was like, "Yeah, I don't remember that. It wasn't that impactful in my life, bro." Like,
we've said it before, but like I gotta, as an instructor myself, I gotta tell you, everybody out there, the instructors will have that interaction that you crystallize in your head and you will live for the rest of your life. That instructor doesn't think about it the second they break the door to the team room. The second that they walk into the team room, they're going on, like they're talking to the bros and eating lunch and going on with their day. They do not remember. It's not that we don't care. We care about you individually. I've seen hundreds of the same looking student throughout my career. They're like, "Oh man, you were so mean. Do you remember this time?" I'm like, "Absolutely not. I don't remember that at all. Like, I don't think about you. It's like the meme. "Oh, I can't believe you did that." And it's like the John Hamm meme, right? Like, I don't think about you at all. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, sorry, man. It's not that I don't think that you're a valuable person and you're an airman, and I love that you tried and whatever else. But
of interactions.
Yeah. If I yelled at you, you probably deserved it. And if I failed you, you failed to an objective standard that I could hold you to. And that was the end of it for me.
Yeah.
And if I seem passionate in the moment, it had nothing to do with you as a person. And then therefore I don't remember it.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. And at the time we were pumping kids through because, we're having a new class start every 3 days. And we had a lot more failures, but we were like pumping them through. So it got to the point where like when you're an instructor for 4 years, like especially in in one division primarily, because I taught demo and air at one point. But I knew if a kid was going to fail the minute I gave him his reconnaissance paperwork to start doing his problem. He would just start talking to me, and I'm like, "Oh, you're going to fail." I don't even have to. I can just sit back in my office now.
Right. Well, and then it's funny too. I call it the out of body instructional experience. Right? There are some things that are so rote memory for you. You've said so many times. I would literally think about other things as I was teaching. Like I would be teaching a block of instruction, and I would be like, okay, what am I going to have for lunch? Or how's the workout feeling? Or I'm going to go see the PT after this because I'm a little bit tight. Those interactions with those students are exactly the same. This is going to blow your mind, everybody out there listening that's about to be a student. Your instructor that gave you that dressing down, it's probably the same script that they used the last time a student failed and the last time they were getting kicked out of the pipeline. And that instructor was probably not really that engaged with you.
Oh yeah. I mean, there was, I did do some random, because every time we had someone fail for the first time, like an air's pretty far into the school. And we would have like every once in a while you'd get like a kid who his first test, he'd failed all through EOD school. And every time that happened to me, I would take a selfie with him and it would just like annihilate his day. So I'd be like, this is your first test you failed? And he's like, yeah. And there was an Army captain. He's like, yeah, this is my first test. Cause he was like taking it really hard. I'm like, why are you being so bent out of shape? Like you failed a test. Like it, happens every single day here. And he was like, this is the first test I've failed. Like I've never failed a test. I've gotten hundreds on everything. And I was like, dude. And so I like,
in that moment, you're like,
yeah, I was like, hey, hold on. I was like, I gotta get this.
I mean, that was this big smiley face on, and they're just in the depths of despair.
Yeah, I'm like, got it.
That is a power move, my friend Charles. You and we're kindred spirits.
So you had to start making it fun, like air and ground. You failed people so many times. We would start messing with people. You're like, hey, you failed today, and we were like, oh no, you passed. Well, I switched that up because like if a kid did really bad, and it was the most embarrassing test I'd ever seen, I'd be like, hey, dude. So you passed today, like, good job. And he's like, really? I'm like, no. I'm like, are you serious? Like, you would honestly believe that, like, I would, like, you passed? Like, everything you did today was it? No.
The bomb went.
Okay with it if I did pass you?
Yeah. Right. I'm like, you got a 7.
You killed your team.
Yeah. Like, everyone's dead. And it wasn't even the right problem. Like, you did the wrong, like, everything was incorrect. And they'd be like, oh, but you said
But.
Yeah, I mean, it was, and you're not allowed to haze the Marines. Like the Navy and the Army and the Air Force were actually like at the time 10 to 14. Like they were pretty relaxed. They're like, yeah, do whatever you want. The Marines were like, if there's any hazing, we have to leave because they're all NCOs and they take it real seriously. So you had to be like really creative. So with a Marine, you just have to like mess with them. There was this kid from Boston that he like lost a pretty significant fuse, and they're all controlled, like it's classified. And so I found it like 5 minutes later. And so I just proceeded to mess with them for like the entire day.
Good.
To the point that like I forgot I was even messing with them. And like people are yelling at him for losing like, controlled item. And he's freaking out. He's going through ammo cans trying to find it. And I totally forgot that I was screwing with him. And eventually like someone finally told him and broke it to him that, I'm just fucking with him. But when I came back, he was like, hey, Sergeant Howell. He's like, I just want to say like, fuck you. And I was like, oh, you found the fuse. I was like, I'm sorry, man. He's like, I thought I was getting arrested and kicked out of the military. I was like, dude, we lose shit all the time.
Those are shenanigans. Yeah. I approve.
Yeah, I'm like, welcome to the military, man. Welcome to EOD. Like, this is going to get worse. Like, wait till you get back to your unit and you're an actual EOD crab instead of the time you spent with getting hazed for the first year going in the Marine Corps. But yeah, it was, I loved being an instructor. After I left being an instructor, I was immediately deployed to Jordan. Which my wife was pissed because she had Red Sox tickets for me and we were going to go on vacation to Maine and stuff. And I get to my first unit, which was Eglin, which was an easy PCA. They didn't like that I asked for 10 days house hunting. They thought that was kind of weird since I was already there. But so I showed up and like literally my chief was like, hey, when was your last deployment? I'm like, 4 years ago, like 1,200 days. You already know. Like, why? He was like, are you ready to go next week? And I was like, yeah. And
yeah. As a matter of fact, I am.
And that next week did turn into like 4 months, but it was like immediate. So that was one of those deployments where you were told that we were going to go on, like it was going to be, the cool guys shit. And you're like, oh yeah, like I'm back, I'm back, baby. Like we're doing it. And then we sat there for 6 months waiting for something to happen. ISIS kicked off, a Jordanian plane crash, and then that they, lit them on fire, and that changed. Like then nothing was happening. We're just like waiting. And then while I was there was an actual F-16 crash. with an American pilot. We had went down fully loaded, F-16. So this was like my reintegration of like what EOD. I thought by this point EOD had gotten themselves into enough of like the higher ups' mind that they know what we do on their base. Like they know why we exist, and they know what they're going to get out of us. Well, when the plane crashed, obviously there's 4 missiles, 4 bombs. Like there's armament on board, and it's off base, so we have to go. So when I'm in the meeting, we had to go in civilian clothes and all that kind of stuff, and they were like arguing about who has civilian SUVs. Well, when I'm looking at the roster of all the teams that are going, I'm like, hey, well, why isn't EOD on there? And they're like, why would you go? I'm like, because there's armament on board. We have to go out there and we have to disarm it. Like it's on fire. And they're like, once we secure the scene and once we know all the classifieds taken care of, we'll see if we need EOD. And I was like, really? I was like, okay, because I'll tell you right now, the accident review board, safety review board, no one's going out there until EOD safed everything. So I don't know what to tell you. And they're like, we will get back to you. And I was like, and that was the squadron commander for the fighter wing. So I was like, all right, well, the minute they left, the absent commander had called and was like, how's it going? Because, they lost a pilot, planes down, all the munitions, and they're like, well, we're coming to the scene. They're like, has EOD saved like all the munitions yet? And they're like, EOD's not even with us. And they kind of like blamed it on us. Like, we didn't want to go. Like, we're busy, and I was like, no, I was in that room. Like I was ready. I had my classified, like we're doing it. So they had to fly us out in a helicopter. And so we actually beat the actual, the unit that was going to go out there to secure it. So they flew us out in a Jordanian helicopter. We landed, they dropped us right onto the, burning F-16. So we started, and there's stuff everywhere. And so when they finally showed up, they like this squadron commander that was out there was acting like I've never seen a missile before. So he's trying to cover it with like a sheet. They're trying to collect classified, like he's running into like the burning fuselage. And I'm just like, I'm not going to keep trying to stop you from like trying to hurt yourself or, maybe initiate one of those, burning ordnance items, because obviously you don't know why I'm here. Like you don't know why we exist for your unit. And to this day, that's what it's felt like with all 4 branches. Like the Army, if I go to an Army, like, and they're asking me what I do, the Army's like, oh, that's, awesome. We know what you do. Marines, same thing. Navy's like, well, you don't do Halo or dive, so you're okay. But in the Air Force, it's like, do you? Like,
let me tell you the most frustrating thing of every single deployment that I've ever done, ever. And it's in the first 2 weeks. And it's you sit down with base leadership, and I had to give a capabilities brief for what PJs do and when they should use us and when they should call us. And it was every single deployment I ever went on. Most frustrating thing to look at fellow blue suiters, commanders of bases, and then they would ask the most basic questions. They'd be like, oh, that's cool. But what if the LZ's hot? I'm like,
that's why we have guns. Yeah.
Bro,
Armed combatants.
It's what we do.
We're really the only ones going into a hot LZ.
We love to use them. We really do. Like we're just like all this other Air Force stuff is cool, but really we're just here for the violence. So can you just put us there? Because that's what we want to do. Charles, we're getting we're getting some great war stories here. I want to transition to the current job now. So now you found yourself after master instructor, multiple deployments, pouring your experience into these young men and women that want to become EOD techs, and that's your entire focus now. So is the EOD a sessions manager, ECD? What does that term mean? I'm sorry, we talked about it.
The Enlisted Classification Directory.
Okay, great. So
Air Force ECD,
yeah. In your current position now, your entire focus is not only telling these stories, but giving that experience back to the folks that are going to try, right? So now from your position as a scouter, recruiter, developer, you are getting these people into the Air Force. First of all, how has that been, for you? So like, being in the scout, realm as well, like really letting people know what these jobs are and what they do. And it's something that we obviously care about, hence the podcast. How has it been for you? And then what are the biggest challenges you've been seeing lately?
So it was a job that I took voluntarily. The guy that was sitting he just created the position, and I volunteered to take it as kind of seeing the end of my career. I'm like, okay, I got a good 3-4 years left. I'm kind of my body's breaking down, so it's definitely time to move on. I wanted to go back in that mentor role, and doing this for with basically adjacent to the 330th and trying to help their cause, whether no matter what it is for the SW career fields or the combat support, like trying to make sure that I do my part to help out. So when we used to have EOD and Sears, CCT, and PJ scouts, I was help everyone try to coordinate EOD units to get out there so they can do that. It helped like the recruiting effort, in which we're bringing that scout program back on. And I just help hire some of the EOD guys. So my biggest thing is to try to meet the CFM's intent. So his intent is to graduate a certain amount of people a year. And that starts at the recruiting process. And so whether that's recruiting the right people, recruiting enough people, when I took the job on, our current IFT was 11 minutes and 3 pull-ups. Not hard at all. In fact, very basic. So we raised it to now 6 pull-ups. And it's still below Sears, IFT. But as recruiting was struggling through getting like the SW candidates in when they moved from 9T5 to the 1 Zulus, and now eventually all the way to the GTEB 1 Zulus. It's been like a huge transitional process and they don't like when we don't meet goal, because now SEER, EOD, and now everyone's not meeting goal, and they're, they want to say that it's, due to IFT standards or whatever, but there's a whole lot that plays into this. So, but my job now is to basically track those kids through basic, make sure they're not getting kicked out for whatever reason. If they get set back and recycled in BMT, whatever it is trying to make sure that I'm tracking the metrics of why those particular airmen couldn't make it through BMT, why the airmen that got to Shepherd prelim didn't get through prelim, like what was the reasons that they failed. So I track all their failures. I track the reasons, because we get a lot of SIEs, a lot of kids who get to prelim and then they find out we lost 20 individuals just in the Air Force alone through OAF and OAF. You can die on a training operation. Like, it's not just combat. And they're like, I thought this was a robotics school. Like I thought this was.
And what's SIE for everybody out there?
Self-initiated elimination.
You quit.
Quitting. Yeah. And so, and it happens at SW too, because like back in the 9T5, you'd have a kid who wanted to be a PJ. Like his whole life was, or not whole life, but his whole goal was to be a PJ. He gets in, they're like, you suck in the pool, you're going to be a TACP guy. And he's like, now his heart's not in it. So he quits. And at that time, what I started doing, because going into BMT trying to get kids, me and Thomas found out, and Master and Harris, that the kids in BMT, they just weren't into the SW career fields or the combat support. Or did they have the ASVAB scores or the PT scores? It was either one or the other they didn't have. And so what I started doing, and much to Colonel Schindler's chagrin and LZ and some of the other guys, is every time a kid would fail or non-select out of ANS, I would be like, hey, do you want to reclass into SEER or EOD? And what I found is the 330th has identified every qualified applicant for our 6 jobs. So at the end of the day, even though they're not meeting goals, they still had basically identified during that ship week, during those kids that went to BMT, the kids that went to ANS or SWIC, SWAS, whatever we call it these days, those were the best candidates available. And some of the guys they sent on EOD contracts and SEER contracts they didn't really know what they're getting themselves into. So they quit, went maintenance, whatever. But those kids that were in development with those, T3I guys, those are quality candidates. Especially if they were non-selects, failed, maybe got injured, and just didn't have like the ability to stay in the pool, or maybe they were just that bad in the pool because, and right now that like all 4 jobs are pretty much in the pool during the initial phase. So, some of them get disenfranchised because they would really just want to be TACP and not swim. But when I get to them and I can give them that interview, what I've gotten is like giving them like the mentorship of, all right, so you're non-selected. Now what? Would you like to go EOD? Now I don't talk them into it at all. All I want them to do is make an informed decision at this point. We've already got them in the Air Force for the next 6 years. I want to see if they are willing to stay adjacent to these types of career fields. Would they be willing to do this? It's just as hard. They have just as big of a chance of failing for different reasons. And what's what's crazy is since I started doing that, and since the guy before me started doing that, those guys that we've sent from, non-selects and injuries and whatnot into EOD school have almost a 30% better chance at graduating. So our EOD contract airmen at like currently they have about 65% chance of failing at Shepherd. And then the kids that have been like sent from non-selects into the EOD school have a 65% chance of passing Shepherd through EOD school. And I still get text messages to this day from kids that I, helped go from, either having their dreams crushed of whatever job they thought they wanted to do to graduating EOD school and like texting me and like, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And that was kind of like the same thing that I was getting like when I was in EOD school. Every time someone asked you to pin them their EOD badge, like you're like, wow, they're actually listening to me and thought I was funny enough to have them pin them. So that's cool. Like, I'm not that memorable, but like now that I'm having that to these days, it's still pretty cool. But with that said, like it's still all about tracking, and like the process from Shepherd, like recruiting, BMT, Shepherd, and Eglin. Eglin's hard to track because it's like 12 months long, so it takes forever to like really get a metric out of what those guys look like. But every time we start getting like a yearly metric, that's when I go back and I look to change what requirements we have in the ECD to help our CFMs like intent about how many kids we need to graduate, every year. So it's been pretty fun.
Not an easy job, that's for sure. Whether it's scouting or recruiting, anything involved with that is not easy, and you guys are busy because there's a lot of folks that want to do EOD. And then what about? So I noticed your shirt. What about the EOD Foundation?
So the EOD Warrior Foundation used to be the EOD Memorial Foundation. It's basically, all of our career fields pretty much have, a foundation that we use basically for to donate mainly for, scholarships, not just, like money for like, all of our families and whatnot, but it also goes to like they do a bunch of support for people that have PTSD or any other issues. And it is one of the, it's really moved on since I first came in. Like the EOD Memorial Foundation was a lot more kind of one-sided. And then to this point, now it's got so much more going on with their scholarship foundations and the money they raise for to helping out not just EOD families, but really, anyone adjacent that really does require the assistance. But it is a really good foundation. It's something that like I try to donate to every year. They did just start a podcast. They're starting to get kind of into the weeds, with TBI, because that's a big thing for EOD right now is is basically the medical history that we've kind of like, we really dropped the ball early on in all these wars is your exposure to, blast, and whatnot. So, and it's just trying to bring more awareness to, the actual all four branches and, what they, have dealt with and go through and whatnot.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thanks for doing that because somebody's got to do it. And we've got all these fantastic foundations out there and we got all these people that really want to do goodness and help out. And a lot of times they just don't know. So the easiest thing for them is to donate money because they want to give back in some kind of way. And, it can be tough to get creative in that kind of way. But if that's the way to give back, definitely go check out the EOD Warrior Foundation.
Yep. And you can find that over at eodwarriorfoundation.org. You just saw it there on the screen as I shared it, as Charles was talking through it. So eodwarriorfoundation.org. Consider supporting, follow the podcast. It really does help them out just to get their eyes on some of these issues that EODs have.
Absolutely.
So Charles, let's get to the meat and potatoes, man. So you got a guy or girl that wants to become an Air Force EOD tech, and they want to start the process. I'm going to bring up the EOD homepage here in a moment, but talk them through that process, talk them what they should be prepared for, and then give them what we're here to give them, tell them how to be successful. So
the first off, the best way to be successful is to, really start to, get your physical fitness in control. You want to be able to run. And what I tell anybody, it's not so much how many push-ups and sit-ups and all that you can do. It's all about, like, at the end of the day, you're going to be, a rucksack, think about 45 pounds, at a minimum, body armor, helmet, and all that kind of stuff. But can you basically move as long as I need you to? Maybe not fast, maybe not, but can you move almost forever? Because that's the kind of things that we're looking for. We're looking for a guy that's, girl that's not going to have that, any type of, that quit in them, because BMT is not physically challenging. So you need to come in while you're going through development. You need to listen to those developers. You need to pay attention, because those guys and girls know exactly what, they need you to do to be successful with what BMT is going to offer. And what BMT is going to offer is not getting you in better shape than when you're entering, unless you're just in tragic shape. But if you're in good shape, there's a good chance you could, regress during that time of BMT, because there's not, as much. So listen to developers, do as you can when you can get. So when you get through BMT, you're not going to lose that muscle mass and that, that will to drive. Ask questions when you're at Shepherd. What I tell everyone is ask questions. Just keep asking questions. I am going to fuck with you if I'm your instructor. I'm going to keep messing with you. I'm going to make fun of you, but keep asking that question. If I don't give you the answer, it's because it's already written on your paper, or your teammate next to you is trying to give it to you. But ask questions. If I do respond, listen. And if you listen, do as you're fucking told. Because at the end of the day, I'm going to tell you, and then you're going to listen to me. Now do it. Because there's nothing more irritating than me saying, do X, Y, and Z, and you just do something completely off the wall. Like you weren't listening, you didn't do as you're told. Once you get through that position, because Shepherd is basically the black and white, there's not a lot of, it's very, very cut and dry. It's not a lot of, people say it's academic, but it's not academic. It is, did you listen? Are you following instructions? Can you pay attention to detail? Can you just do as you're told? Once you get through that section, Eglin is when it's going to start breaking into, are you able to solve problems? And this is the analogy I give for everybody. Have you guys ever been to IKEA?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so everyone knows that you go to IKEA, you buy furniture, and you have to put it together yourself. So there's two types of people when they buy furniture at IKEA. They let's say they go in there to get a computer desk because they're that old school. They get it back home, they dump out all the pieces and parts, and they're looking at them. They're like, all right, so I've got my inventory list. I have everything I need to make this thing look like that computer desk I saw in that garage sale of IKEA. And so they're looking through it all, and the only thing they don't have is instructions. And so there's two ways you can go about that. You can either have an absolute fucking meltdown and start complaining, call IKEA and be like, you guys didn't put the instructions in here. How am I supposed to put this together? This is crap. Like what am I going to do? And you drive all the way back to IKEA because it's never that close. It's like 2 hours away. So you drive all the way down there, return that fucking desk. You bring the new one all the way back to your house, dump it all out, and it's the same thing. And now you're missing your tools that you needed to put it together, and you still don't have instructions. So you just wasted a bunch of time. You still don't have all your fucking shit put together, and you spent all that money. Or there's the guy that once he realizes he has everything, he's got all the parts and pieces, he has all the tools, he knows what it looks like, and he knows that his neighbor next to him has already put this together. So he can either ask his neighbor for help, or he can use his time to I'm going to sit down here. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to put it together. I'm going to solve this problem without having an absolute meltdown and complain and cry to the guy next to me. That's the guy that's going to be successful at EOD school. The girl and guy that can do that can literally just look and see that they have an issue and they're missing a piece, but they're going to figure it out. And if they're going to ask help if they need it, but they're going to figure it out, and they're going to either work as a team or they're going to, I don't care if it takes you 5 hours, 2 hours, 10 minutes, put it together. But the guy who complains and freaks out and throws an absolute fit and just, calls people and just bitches the whole time. Yeah, you're going to do terrible. and that goes with because there's people you're telling hey, this is what you did wrong today. You failed, but you have a good chance to pass tomorrow if you do, these 3 things. You're like, I don't think I failed. And you're like, yeah, you're fucked. All right, fine.
I can see into the future in my little instructor crystal ball. And I know how your reeval is going to go.
You're going to do bad tomorrow.
You sure about that?
Are you sure about that?
And you'd be surprised. You'd even have people argue with you. I gave a kid a 94 and he wanted to it's passing. And he was like, I think I got 100. I'm like, are we doing this? Because I can change it. Yeah.
Right.
We can go.
Yeah. If you really want to dig into this, you have my attention now. You wanted my attention, and now
Thought
you
you were
have my
cool
attention.
until 5 minutes ago.
Right.
But
yeah.
and that's the thing about EOD school is what I try to tell people is it is all about problem solving. It is all about just listening, doing as you're told, and paying attention to detail. People keep saying academic. We're going to teach you basic math. It is literally converting inches to centimeters. These things are not complicated. It is not doing long division in your head. It is physical basic math. It's physical reading instructions and doing what those publications tell you. The hard part of EOD is once you graduate. The schoolhouse is just, kind of going through the motions and doing what's written on the paper and following basic instructions. What's funny is the ordnance divisions are the hardest divisions in EOD school. But when you graduate, that's the easiest part of our job. It's those IEDs, nukes, and all that kind of stuff that were like easier, that are like the more difficult because now you're talking about tactics and blah, blah. And so they just need to know, pay attention, do as you're told, and just keep taking your time, solve those problems. Don't freak out.
Yeah. So for everybody out there, if you want to be involved in EOD, it's probably one of the best mottos of all time. It's initial success or total failure. Go over to airforce.com, check out the Special Warfare Careers for more info on the EOD pipeline and everything you need to do to be successful. Charles, we always end on a piece of advice for everybody out there that wants to protect the force in the way that EOD can only do. What advice would you have for those people that want to get in? They really want to put themselves in harm's way, and they want to put themselves on the cutting edge of protecting Americans and our national allies. What advice would you have for those folks that want to get into this and be successful?
So my advice is always to go into it 1000%. When you join a career field like EOD or like SEER, PJ, CCT, any job that is actually difficult, when you walk into that door with that big of a failure rate, do everything you possibly can with all of your energy that's something you want to do. Once you're in it, you'll realize, and you graduate, it is the people that stand next to you is the reason why I've always kept going. It is every reason that I woke up in the morning and kept going to work or kept doing what I did, all those deployments, all the TDYs, everything I've ever done. It was because of the guys and girls that have ever stood next to me. That has been what keeps us in these career fields and why these smaller career fields are so much more like what I think are better, because we're just that much closer. Like there is no far, there's nothing farther away than the guy that you went to school with, whether it's Army, Marines, Navy, or Air Force. So the camaraderie that you get in jobs like this is 1000% the other reason to come for these jobs in the military. You are going to get a community that you never, ever expected to get. It is nothing like you thought any of those families you had back home or that your back home is now wherever your team unit is, wherever is going on there, those guys and girls next to you, that's it. And that is the whole reason I've re-enlisted 3 times, and all that stuff. That is the reason to come and do this. And then on a random Wednesday, you get to blow shit up. And if you don't like blowing shit up, then, that's kind of lame. I don't have to do with that.
Yeah. We call that in the Instagram influencer game, we call that a banger reel. That's what we call that, Charles. Man, I want to say thanks so much for everything that you're doing. EOD is a fantastic career field. I've worked with them personally, and I have nothing but the greatest things to say because they do provide you that safety blanket and they do lower the risk for the stuff that we're doing. Thanks for everything that you're doing now. If you guys have any questions, I'm sure we'll get some contact information out there for Charles so that you can contact him directly. Charles, if you got any other EOD bros, man, we love the Krabby Boys. We'd love to talk to everybody. So have them come on the podcast. We constantly get questions about it. So
I will definitely send them your way. They're all probably a lot more sarcastic than I am, but
good. Perfect. They'll fit right in. Yeah, we'll get Trent on here. Trent's the sarcasm master. So thanks for coming out for this one, everybody. Check out Air Force EOD. Go to airforce.com and check out the Special Warfare Career Fields to find more information on EOD. Charles, thanks so much for coming on. Check us out wherever we are. Share the show with everybody you know. Hit that like button. Just caress that subscribe button so you don't miss anything that we're doing. And for that, we're done out here.
Thanks,
Have
guys.
a good one.